Welcome to From the Cutting Room Floor. Pastors always have more material in their folder for that week, I think, than they're able to get to in the context of live preaching, and that's what this podcast is about, just diving into a little bit some of the scraps that may have ended up on the cutting room floor for these sermons that I'm working through. And yesterday we were in Pergamum, Jesus' message to the church in Pergamum. There's a couple of things in there that I didn't spend a lot of time on that are worth just a couple minutes reflection. In Jesus' words to this church, he identifies himself as the one who has the sharp double-edged sword. That imagery comes back. That one's in verse 12, and then this imagery comes back in verse 16. He's addressing the church who there's been a toleration of the teaching of Balaam, and he says, "Repent, therefore, from this, otherwise I will soon come to you and will fight against them with the sword of my mouth." So it comes back, this imagery, the sword of the mouth. What is going on? What is meant by that? I think there's a couple things we can pull from that. One is Jesus' word is certainly authoritative. There's an authority that is conjured up with this imagery of sword. You could also say that there's a threat here, and I'm going to touch on this next week after, I'm not sure which, because there's some repetition in these 7 letters, where the threat of judgment is a legitimate motivation to tap into when trying to correct error and behavior in a church. And that doesn't ring well probably in our context, but just because our cultural context doesn't deem it as a good way to go about it, doesn't mean it's not. We need to make sure that we're listening more intently to the scriptures and to those around us. And so Jesus is clearly using the threat of his judgment to try to spur this church to repent. Jesus' word is authoritative, and his word will be the final word. In practice, we can find ourselves in situations where what the world judges to be right conflicts with what Jesus judges to be right. Another way of asking that question then is, in that moment, whose sword do you respect? The sword of the world and the judgment the world might inflict, or the sharp two-edged sword in the mouth of Jesus. Later on, we're going to get a very clear glimpse of the fact that we're going to, as Christians, we're going to face someone's wrath. We're either going to face the wrath of the world, or we're going to face the wrath of Jesus. There's no escaping it. And so we have to draw some firm lines. We have to know where we're going to draw those lines. Sword of the mouth. There's another implication here in this text. When sometimes pastors, churches can be criticized for being too particular. Maybe they can get accused of being "quote unquote" heresy hunters. Churches can be dismissed as divisive. They can be labeled troublemakers because they're too particular about certain things. I really don't think that is true. We can be, but not as much as maybe the world would suggest we can be. If the scriptures teach it, hold to it. Don't be flexible. Hold to it. and deal with the implications of that. Deal with the consequences of that. If the scriptures teach it, hold to it. Robert Haldane offers a needed correction. He reminds, basically he's saying that he reminds us that anyone who thinks Christianity can exist without controversy has misunderstood the New Testament, because that's where this puts us. If we're holding to firm doctrinal convictions, we're going to find ourselves in controversy. And some critics of the church, of Christianity, may say, you're always in controversy. Why would I want to be a part of you? Well, what he's saying is that basically he says in all the history of Jesus himself, in the biography of Jesus, we never find him out of controversy. Jesus was always embroiled in it. And so if we think the church of Jesus Christ can escape it, then we really ought to question whether or not that particular church of Jesus Christ is being faithful to Jesus Christ, because Jesus himself was always embroiled in controversy. So I think a recalibration of expectations here is what's needed. When you read closely Jesus, you always find him, he was involved with something. There were people who didn't like what he was saying, who didn't like what he was teaching. He was always embroiled in controversy. Well, why would we think the church is going to be any different? And Jesus' words to us in Luke 6 are very important to remember. Remember what Jesus said there. He said, "Woe to you when all people speak well of you." Let that sink in. Woe to you when all people speak well of you, for so their fathers did to the false prophets. I think by implication we can say that if we are staying true to Jesus' word as the culminating true prophet, as the one who has a sharp double-edged sword coming from his mouth, if we're staying true to that, the implication is that not all people will speak well of us. And so again, it is all about making sure, all right, are my expectations for what life is going to be like if I live faithfully for Jesus, are my expectations calibrated rightly? What was life like for Jesus? It wasn't, people weren't always speaking well of him. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Does that mean he was doing something wrong? Obviously not. He's the only human being to ever live a perfect life. So it's right for us. It's right for us to take stances on things the scriptures teach and realize that that is going to invite those who maybe don't understand this. It's going to invite them to label us as heresy hunters. Embroiled in controversy. That's just the way it's going to be. We have to remember that was the pattern of the life of Jesus Christ, and we can expect the church is going to have to live through that too. Now, I would say on the other side of that, I would say in so doing, we don't have to be mean about it. There's also something to be said for tact. I can hold to a firm position on something, be uncompromising on something the scriptures teach, and I can do that without being a jerk about it. I can do it with a firm but gentle hand, and not allow the name calling or the friction that's inviting to cause me to behave in ways that are uncharitable. So that is really something we can take before the Lord in prayer to ask us to give us the wherewithal to hold firmly in truth where the scriptures teach it. We're not going to be compromising on that, but to do it in a way that is still kind. Even though some will inevitably, they'll interpret our conviction as unkindness. That's not your problem. That's not our problem. But we certainly can devolve, I think, in holding firmly to what the scriptures teach into people who are suddenly not conducting ourselves in a manner that's very kind. Lord, give us the wisdom to know how to do those things, both those things well. So a couple extra ingredients from the cutting room floor on Jesus' message to the church in Pergamum. As always, it's great. I'm glad that you're tuning into this and hope you're finding these things to be helpful to you. And we'll see you next time.